What's going on, Summoners? Welcome back to another ProGuides Wild Rift video. I'm Kangas, and today we got our latest issue of Counter the Meta. We'll go over some of the most popular picks in Wild Rift, and then exactly how to counter them by providing you a specific champion pick that has the tools to do so. So hit that sub button, and let's get right into it. Alright, so the first champion up is Twisted Fate. He's been gaining a lot more precedence in the meta lately since the buffs in patch 2.3 that really helped with his overall kit. With strong wave clear, a variety of cards to draw, and a teleporting ultimate, the card wielder can be incredibly hard to deal with. His overall playstyle relies on accelerating the pace of the game. By roaming the map and throwing out his gold card where necessary, the enemy team often falls victim to his well-timed ganks. If you're playing mid lane against TF, it's pretty hard to match his roams. I mean, he literally just teleports away and boom, he's at the sidelines. So unless you're playing Galio or Pantheon, chances are you're not going to be able to directly match his roams as effectively. And if you're playing either of these champions, TF is quite a bit better at clearing the waves, therefore granting him more priority in the game. Galio used to far outmatch the Magician, but after lots of nerfs to the Colossal and major buffs to TF, Twisted Fate is now a stronger champion overall. So who should you play to counter TF? Well, our solution to the card game master is to play the Hexplosives master, Ziggs. Ziggs wants to be pushing the lane and generally excels at doing so. This makes it way more difficult for TF to roam. After all, if you don't push out your lane before a roam, you lose out on a ton of the minion gold thereafter. In addition, Ziggs' turret execution is excellent, so if TF does roam, despite being pushed in, Ziggs can easily punish the roam by taking down a turret or two. And this is super important since you never want to let your opponents do what they like without taking anything in return. But that's not all. Twisted Fate's playstyle is characterized as an enabler. In essence, he tries to speed up the game and help create faster plays. This is done by roaming, throwing out CC, dealing extra damage, and pushing out waves. He is very much not a champion that you pick for lane, but rather a game pick. In essence, he relies on playing outside of the lane for kills and objectives. Ziggs, on the other hand, is more of a staller. He stands far back and performs his job by preventing people from playing by utilizing his insanely strong zone control. By doing so, he makes it incredibly scary to play for objectives. He throws out so many area of effect skills that deal massive damage that walking up to an area that the Ziggs is focusing becomes incredibly difficult. Chances are you'll have to stand really far back to avoid poke, or just commit to the play and take some necessary damage. So this is what we mean when we say Ziggs is a staller. But now let's compare the two directly. If Ziggs stalls the game, obviously it'll become even harder to accelerate the pacing. Take, for example, if Ziggs and Twisted Fate are both involved in a big team fight. TF throws out a gold card, stunning a single target, allowing for his team to close in. But as his team closes in, Ziggs throws out multiple bombs blocking the path. TF's teammates have to either take the damage to deal damage, or just back off. This is a massive aspect in countering the Twisted Fate pick, but does require a basic understanding of the gameplay goals for both champions. Without the know-how, Ziggs doesn't naturally counter Twisted Fate, so only by knowing what playstyles both champs typically play for and understanding the strengths and weaknesses of both can you truly play Ziggs to counter TF. So with our first pick out of the way, next up we got our question of the day. What kind of champions do you like playing? Do you just play what's meta, or do you go for one specific champion that you really like? Or maybe a bit of both? Personally, I'm a boomer, so I like champs that don't take a lot of mechanical skill like Malphite and Singed, but let me know your answers in the comments below, and let's get back to the video. And before we move on, be sure to check out our Wild Rift community Discord. We got tons of players just like yourself, so make sure to join in on the fun talks and participate in community events. Link in the description down below. And our next champion is KAISA. She's been a pretty stable pick for quite some time now, characterized as a late game hyper carry. KAISA's kit scales excellently thanks to her ability to evolve when a certain threshold for specific stats are reached. Her first ability, Acathian Rain, evolves after stacking AD. This ability is her primary damage dealing skill, and when evolved, it deals absolutely insane single target damage. Evolving Acathian Rain is one of KAISA's top priorities since prior to the evolution, her overall damage is a little low. But damage isn't the only asset in KAISA's kit. By evolving her third ability, Supercharge, by stacking attack speed, she gains invisibility and extra movement speed, of which can be used to effectively kite the enemy. Her single auto attacks don't deal absurd damage, but stack over time through the usage of her passive. After 5 hits, the procs pop, dealing additional damage to her target. And for additional tips on how to build KAISA, check out our 1-minute short that does exactly that. But what we're talking about today is how do you counter KAISA? Well, the pick that we have for you is Draven. Draven's early game damage is undoubtedly the highest in the early stages of the game in regards to pure auto attacks. As long as he manages to catch his axes, the Executioner deals fantastic damage with every auto. When facing against KAISA, keep in mind that she excels at dealing damage over an extended period of time. She has the initial burst from Acathian Rain, but after that her damage falls off if she cannot proc her passive. So when laning against KAISA as Draven, simply make sure to hit her as many times as possible and force her off before she can utilize her passive effectively. Basically, the loop will look like this. Auto attack her with 2 spinning axes and keep a close eye on how she reacts. Chances are, after taking that initial damage, she'll either back off immediately, scared by your damage, or commit to an all-in engage. Either way, be prepared to throw out Draven's third ability, Stand Aside, to disrupt her pathing. If she's running away, knock her aside to get closer so you can deal more damage. If she's running towards you, knock her in a direction where you're able to keep your distance. After all, it's much easier for KAISA to deal her key damage if she sticks close to her target. Meanwhile, as Draven, it's easier for you to position your axes if you keep your distance. Now, the biggest thing that you need to keep in mind is what the KAISA wants to do and then counter it immediately after. By knocking her away when she engages, she loses out on a massive amount of gap close. Knock her towards you if she runs away, and you strike the fear of Draven into her heart and realistically force her to play passive for the entire laning phase. But don't think that you're just straight up overpowered as Draven in this matchup. Keep in mind what range KAISA is at an advantage and what range Draven is at an advantage. Typically, Draven wants to keep a certain amount of distance from the enemy since it's much easier to manage the spinning axes from afar. KAISA, on the other hand, wants to sit close to her enemies to be able to deal enough auto attacks to proc her passive. Since Draven can poke KAISA out before she closes in and has some semblance of crowd control to control where KAISA goes, he is an excellent counter pick. But like I said, don't assume that you can just brainlessly play Draven and you'll instantly win against KAISA. Be sure to keep in mind the strengths and weaknesses of both champions and abuse KAISA's weak early game, and then of course take advantage of her slow scaling to snowball the game in your favor. And the last matchup for the day will focus around countering RAKAN. A lot of players have been abusing his practically full AP build since it grants incredible healing and very strong damage on his engages. During teamfights, he is an absolute monster thanks to his fantastic mobility and crowd control, allowing him to set up insane plays. In the latter half of the game, his playstyle is almost unfair, and therefore brings up the question, how do you even play against him? He moves so fast and just runs through the entire enemy team to proc his charm, so what can you do against it? Well, our answer is to simply lock him down. After all, if he's building full AP, he's probably pretty squishy. And the champion that we have for you today is Braum. He's another super strong support, and I'm sure that you all know what his strengths are: protecting his team and providing strong CC. Since we've gone over his champion kit and how to play him, we won't waste too much time with the champion overview, but instead talk more about the direct counter matchup. Now, RAKAN's weakest stage of the game is without a doubt the laning phase. Unless he catches you off guard, most of his skills are very avoidable. So during the early stages of the game, in essence before level 3, keep an eye on what skills he raised through the usage of his skills. This is really important because if you notice that he hasn't raised Battle Dance, the skill that allows him to jump to his allies, he's incredibly vulnerable to a full-on engage. The cooldown on his first abilities are very long during their initial upgrades, so if he whiffs one, make sure that you punish him for it. Also avoid Grand Entrance, RAKAN's knockup, and begin to attack him as Braum by throwing out your first ability, Winter's Bite. Doing so should slow him significantly, and then you can proceed to just hack away at his health with auto attacks, and then of course proc your passive Concussive Blows. If he did level up Battle Dance, the trade becomes a little trickier since he can escape by jumping to his ally. But don't let this deter you. If RAKAN used Battle Dance to escape rather than shield damage, a huge amount of RAKAN's utility as a support goes down. Without his knockup and half of the utility from a shield missing, the feathered support is pretty much useless. Meanwhile, Braum excels at extended trades thanks to the overwhelmingly strong use of his passive Concussive Blows. Honestly, just run the enemy duo down in lane at that point. And again, keep in mind what skills RAKAN uses during the laning phase. This is the most important aspect to countering the champ. Don't let yourself get overwhelmed by how fancy he looks jumping around. It may seem like he's got infinite dashes that allow him to fly around the lane, but in actuality, especially the early game, a single misuse skill is really easily punished because of his long cooldowns. Oh, and the cherry on top is that Braum's ultimate directly counters RAKAN's. If you see him glowing yellow and running at your team, just throw out Glacial Fissure to prevent him from closing in. He does run fast and has a lot of mobility built into the kit, so it might be hard to hit him with the initial knockup of the ult, but the area of effect slow should be more than enough to help prevent RAKAN mowing your team down. Overall, if you manage to proc the full effect of Concussive Blows on RAKAN, he's left a sitting duck. He'll either die immediately after, or be rendered too low to safely re-engage the fight, and this is especially true in lane. So every champion has a weakness or some aspect to exploit. Learning to counter the top tier champions is essential to improving as a player and climbing the ranked ladder. Thanks for watching the video, everybody. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to like and sub to the channel for everything Wild Rift. Also answer our question of the day in the comments down below, but most importantly, best of luck on the Rift, stay hydrated, and I'll see you next time. Your champion has a weakness. Man, I don't know what's going on with my brain today. It's not moving at the normal speeds. All right.